But first up is the big news, unfortunately, about the terrible shooting in Florida this week. 17 individuals killed. And, and to see pictures of those students who were killed, and the adults obviously as well, are just heartrending. What's really upsetting is the knowledge we now have that it probably could have been prevented if the FBI had done its job. Just as I'm coming up here on the video, FBI is admitting that they were warned. They received a tip in January about Mr. Cruz, who is the confessed shooter now, and they didn't do anything. And the bureaucratic response is protocols were not followed. So they had a tip. Now you may know from news reports, it's all out there, that he had put a comment on a YouTube video saying he wanted to be a school shooter or something like that, and someone appropriately called that in, and the FBI didn't follow up. So those people are dead down in Florida, those children are dead down in Florida because the FBI didn't do its job. And if this were the only issue with the FBI, you might say, well, there's no fundamental issue here. But this is a fundamental problem that arises again and again with the FBI. We found, for instance, in the Omar Mateen terrorist shooting in Florida in 2016, you may remember this Islamic terrorist went and shot up the Pulse Nightclub, killed, I think, 49 people. Now, he had been on the radar, again, of the FBI, and they had actually interviewed him. And Judicial Watch asked questions about how the FBI handled Omar Mateen. And we got some documents from the, I think from the local law enforcement down there, who talked to the FBI, and the FBI told them Omar Mateen is not a terrorist. And you look in the original document, not, N-O-T, is capitalized. And he was unlikely to go postal. And that was just, I think, 2.5 years before he went and shot up that nightclub and killed all of those poor people. And on top of that, you have the mishandling of the Boston Marathon bombing, where they had information and warnings about the two terrorist brothers who ended up killing those people in Boston, blowing themselves up, setting that bomb off. And you can go all the way back to 9/11, where if the FBI had followed the leads it was given, that 9/11 attack could have been prevented, I'm convinced, as well. And Judicial Watch was heavily involved in exposing what went on there. And in fact, we represented an FBI agent who blew the whistle on the FBI's incompetence and malfeasance there. And then even under Robert Mueller's reign, again, you had Anwar al-Awlaki, and that's a name that you may not be familiar with, but you should, because his name is still being used to recruit terrorists across the internet today. And he was the first American supposedly droned, assassinated using drones. And he was the most important terrorist leader other than Osama bin Laden at the time he was killed, and this is during the Obama administration. But it looks like he was a confidential informant or asset for the FBI here in the United States. This guy, we received documents from the FBI following this terrorist around, and the investigative notes say we followed him all the way up to the Pentagon, and we broke off contact because he was going into the Pentagon to give some, participate in some, moderate Muslim event in the Bush Pentagon, of all places, shortly after 9/11. And Anwar al-Awlaki had likely been involved in 9/11. He knew many of the perps and had hosted them, and it was clear he was involved. But the FBI obviously thought better of reining him in, and so he fled the country and then was behind the Fort Hood shooting, the shoe bomber, and again, a massive internet, and he basically created the internet jihad and innovated in using the internet to recruit terrorists for the Islamist cause. And obviously he wasn't working for the FBI at that time, but there was enough to bring him in before then, and the FBI didn't. So what is the FBI for but to protect Americans? And this doesn't mean individual agents are terrible people. We know a lot of these agents. We know the retired folks, and we know from sources individual agents are just great Americans. But the bureaucracy in the FBI is like any other bureaucracy here in Washington, D.C., except all the other bureaucracies in Washington, D.C. are held to account more or less, as much as bureaucracies are. But the FBI we're not allowed to talk about. And on top of that, we've got the corruption at the top levels of the FBI with the Russia hacking, the Russia collusion scandal, the illicit targeting of Donald Trump, the cover-up of the Clinton email scandal. Is it any surprise that when you have the leadership of the FBI spending most of their time figuring out ways to hide documents from the American people, hide documents from Congress, target the President of the United States, and basically just battle any efforts at accountability, that they don't get into the nitty-gritty of making sure that when someone is tipped off in their agency that someone may be shooting up a school, that appropriate steps are taken. There are 17 people dead because the FBI failed to do the job that Americans rightly expect from it. And if the agency doesn't do its job, then why do we have the agency? So we'll be asking questions about this, but Judicial Watch has a long record. We've been suing and battling the FBI in court. I've been here 20 years now. And it doesn't matter the administration, the FBI almost uniformly has been arrogant at the top levels, secretive, and corrupt. So it's a shame that it's brought to the forefront through these tragic deaths in Florida, but I just hope it's not the same old response to FBI incompetence. We're just going to pretend it didn't happen, yell about it a few days, and move on. You know, Mr. Wray was testifying earlier this week, and he spent on the Hill. It was a terrible performance, if you want accountability, because he spends all of his time defending and getting his back up anytime someone criticizes the agency. So there's a lot to answer for here. Like I said, if this was the only instance, there might be the FBI institutionally might have a defense, but there's a real fundamental issue with the way the FBI is being run and its management. And you know, don't ask me. Talk to the retired FBI agents. Talk to the whistleblowers. They all know what's going on. It's really outrageous. And you know, we can't bring these people back, but maybe we can give them accountability. I just hope, you know, the people in Washington, and of course, you know, you're going to get this debate about gun control. We at the FBI have information of a terroristic threat made on the internet, and they didn't do anything about it. And what is the response? Let's have gun control.